Hello, welcome to AAUW Connections. Tonight we're going to be talking about an organization that most of us have heard about, Toastmasters International, but that I suspect that many people don't know a lot about. I certainly was very impressed as I started to research it at the layers of interest involved in Toastmasters. It's a more complex organization, an interesting one than I had realized at all. And with us are two Toastmasters, Linda Shively and Ben Cardenas.
Hi, very nice to see you again.
Nice to talk to you. They're going to tell us all about it. First of all, about how old is Toastmasters? When was it founded?
It's about, wow. 84, 85 years.
Wow.
I think.
Yep.
By a gentleman by the name of Ralph Smedley.
Oh, Smedley?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Seen that name in other movies, sort of comic movies, but movies nevertheless. And in doing my own research, I found out that the membership is pretty evenly divided between men and women. Slightly more women, but 53% women and 47% men, which was interesting because I would have guessed off the top of my head, I would have been completely wrong, that it was all men, mostly men.
It started out as only men until the 80s.
Oh, is that right?
It was entirely men. And
by
now there are
rule?
more by rule, and now there are more women than men in Toastmasters.
Well, it's been true certainly in service clubs as well.
And thank God for that.
Yes, of course. Good answer. Anyway, it's also Toastmasters International, so it's a worldwide organization. And how many countries is it in, more or less? And
it's in over 120 countries, and there are clubs everywhere.
And it should be noted, we have almost 300,000 members worldwide.
Wow. That is really, really impressive. And one thing that I learned this evening before we came on air was that there are how many clubs in the Bay Area?
Well, just between San Francisco and Monterey along the peninsula, there are over 250 clubs.
That is really astounding. And if we started to actually do the math about what are the average number of members in a club, how many clubs, that's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
So maybe there are more people who knew about all the details of Toastmasters than I realized. I was on the outside, not knowing. Now, I would like each of you to tell me, let's start, Ben, with you. Why did you join and when?
Back in the early 80s or mid 80s, an organization I belonged to wanted to provide services to their members, and they thought about starting a Toastmasters club. I was one of the original charter members to a club that unfortunately is defunct now, and it was the Asian Business League in San Francisco. So I joined that club because I'm a closet actor back then, and I loved to, I was in presentation, I was in management, so I often had to speak to my employees and other managers, so I wanted to be a better communicator.
But you weren't afraid of public speaking, obviously.
No, I wasn't. I was relishing the opportunity to get up in front of people and speak.
So that's been quite a while. And Linda, how about you?
Well, I was hearing what you said. I think we are two rare examples of people who joined who were not terrified of speaking. And I kept finding organizations that would give me training in public speaking, but it was a one-time thing. And I wanted an opportunity to practice over and over, which is why I joined Toastmasters, so that I could go every week and learn, as opposed to one weekend, take a class, and then never have an opportunity to speak.
So you aren't afraid of public speaking, but you just felt that you wanted to polish your presentation skills.
Exactly. But many people who join are terrified. They can't even speak to the bank teller.
But what should be noted, though, and that's a great question, Marge, is because people come to Toastmasters for many different reasons at many different levels of speaking. So it's not just a club for people who are afraid or want to begin to learn how to speak in public, but at very different levels throughout each club.
So it has a lot to offer from many points of view.
Correct.
For joining. Now, how hard was it to find a club? How do you go about finding a club?
Well, the easiest way is online. Now, in this technically savvy era, Toastmasters.org. There's a search box. You can put in what day of the week you want to attend a club, if you want a morning, an evening, where geographically, and it'll come up with a list of clubs.
Then you just go.
And you just go.
And you can contact ahead of time, or you can just show up. And generally, visiting several clubs is a good idea to see which one fits.
And I assume that each of you did that. Did some shopping around, as it were.
Yeah, actually, I visited and joined other clubs prior to finally ending up with the club that I belong to now. And I may belong to more than one club. Linda, in her case, belongs to 2 different clubs. So each club has a different focus, if you will. So depending on what your focus, your need is, you could join those clubs.
So Linda, you belong to 2 clubs.
Yes.
And Ben, you belong to 1.
Correct.
But you can go around and visit other clubs anytime.
Yes, and I do that often. So I often during my day, I travel quite a bit between around the Bay Area. So if I find a hole in my schedule, say for lunch, and I know I'm going to be in Sunnyvale, I will look up on Toastmasters and look for a club that meets at lunch and go visit them.
And when you're visiting, you're just there as a visitor. You're not expected to get up and speak.
No, you're always expected to speak.
Oh, that's a little risky.
Well, but it's an opportunity. You may get called to speak extemporaneously, or you may fill a role.
Or at the very least, you get up and introduce yourself.
Oh, certainly.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm gathering that the clubs meet at various times of day, and again, you decide what's best for you.
Anyone looking for a club can find the day of the week, the time of the day, the type of club focus that they have, the demographic of the club.
Yes.
That you can slice and dice the information to find exactly the club that fits you.
And how long is the typical meeting?
Each club is different. Our club, for example, meets for exactly 1 hour. We meet at 7:30 in the morning every Thursday. Some clubs meet for 2 hours. Some clubs meet for 3 hours, and sometimes it's a function of how often they meet. So, for example, we meet every week, and it's an hour. Some clubs meet twice a month for 2 hours, and some clubs meet once a month for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, I would think 3 hours is
It's a long time.
It's a long time.
And where do clubs meet usually?
Our club happens to meet at a restaurant. Some clubs meet at various community centers. There are corporate clubs which meet in conference rooms in those offices.
And are those clubs, the corporate clubs, are they specifically for the employees of that corporation?
Usually. Almost always they are specifically for a given company. But there are clubs that happen to meet at a company that are open to the public.
Oh, okay.
So there are closed corporate clubs and there are open corporate clubs. And depending on the size of the company, they can easily have enough members to participate. Some open clubs, corporate clubs are open so they can get the community and neighboring companies to participate as well.
Well, I'm wondering, do the officials or whoever, the executives in a given corporation often feel what we need in this organization is for more of our people to be competent at public speaking,
Yes.
and therefore we are going to sponsor this club.
Exactly.
And we encourage, the degree of encouragement maybe changes.
It varies widely.
But your point is well made, because many corporations who feel that leadership is important and communicating is important sponsor all the members. So they generally, most corporate clubs don't have individual fees, and that's sponsored by the club. And it can be a double-edged sword sometimes, because sometimes your manager could be across the table.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can see it. Now, speaking of fees, how much does it cost to join Toastmasters?
Well, the dues that go to Toastmasters International are $6 a month, and
Per member.
Per member. So very, very small amount.
So something slightly more than $6 a month.
Usually clubs will add a few
few
dollars.
Okay.
Right. So
for administrative fees,
So
to
if you
buy
said,
manuals.
for example, $10 a month, is probably
Right. $10 a club, excuse me, $10 a month is exactly what our club charges. And that's, so for $10 a month, I get to go four times a month. Or if there's a 5 weeks, I get a bonus week.
Oh. So what is the average club size?
Well, a healthy club is at least 20 members. There are clubs that are smaller that function, but because every meeting there are probably about 12 roles that are assigned, it's much easier to have 25 to 30 members because not everybody shows up to every meeting, and you have some flexibility.
So the ideal club would be how much?
Probably 25 to 30 members.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now, are you two both in the same club?
We are. Actually, Linda brought me to the club. I met Linda and she said, you gotta come. You gotta come.
But you were already a Toastmaster.
I was already a Toastmaster at another club.
Oh.
So she
poached you.
She did.
Well,
and I'm glad she did.
I said that our club was good. And,
You're right.
And he could have stayed. You could have still gone to 2 clubs if you wanted.
Oh, absolutely. So the club that I belonged to previously met in the evening, and our club meets in the morning, and it was a good time for both.
Now, once you join a particular club, do you have to stay with that club? Do you pay your dues monthly or
you pay
annually?
it twice a year, and you can transfer membership. So if you move, change jobs, something,
or if you just decided this wasn't a good fit.
Correct.
Yeah, you only pay 6 months at a time.
Now, at any given meeting, about what percentage of the members show up?
It varies dramatically from club to
Every
club.
week's different, and we could speak to our membership. We have, for example, 40 plus, 44 members, and we consistently have somewhere between 18 to 22 people that come every morning.
It's a little more than half.
Yeah.
No, a little less than half, actually.
But what it is, we're very fortunate that we have a healthy membership, and the cast of characters every week changes with the 40 members.
Now you have, I understand, 2 tracks. A communications track and a leadership track. Is that correct?
That's right.
And you can do both of them at the same time.
Or you could, if you have a particular focus or goal in mind, you could take one track, focus a little bit more on one track than the other.
Well, wouldn't a new person typically join for communication and then find out that there's leadership or not?
Usually. Most people, I know when I first joined, I had no idea that there was this leadership component. But every role that we have during a typical meeting qualifies as a project in the leadership manual. So whether you're a timer, giving people the cues of how much time they've used in their speeches, whether you're evaluating a speech, whether you are leading the meeting as Toastmaster, you are fulfilling leadership roles.
Okay. Now you have workbooks, are they?
Yes.
So
For both communications and leadership, correct?
Right. For example, first and foremost, Toastmasters is an educational organization, and the purpose is to become better speakers or a better speaking leader. And these manuals that we're showing right here have exercises, just like if you were to enroll in a course, you go from chapter to chapter to chapter. In this case, they're projects. In this manual, there's 10 projects that build on each other.
Give me an example of one of the projects.
Okay, so if I was as a brand new Toastmaster, a brand new member coming into the club, the hardest thing is getting to speak. Well, there's the first project.
Difficult, you don't mean finding an opportunity. You mean
getting up
the nerve.
Getting up the nerve to do it.
Right.
Okay.
So it's made easy by the project, and the project is called an icebreaker. So if you're a very good speaker, very good communicator, but if the first time, we would want to learn about Marge.
Oh, okay, so you give a little talk about yourself.
Right. And it's the easiest thing to talk about at the very first time is to get up and talk about yourself.
Because you know the material.
Yes.
That's right.
And nobody there can correct you.
Exactly.
Even if you lied about your age.
That's right. Everything. That's right. Actually, yes, you can fictionalize your stories or embellish. And then each project builds on that. So, for example, icebreaker, then one is gesturing, the next would be how to use your voice, Another one might how to use visual aids and so on and so forth. So they build on each project.
So when you were on the second project or the third project,
Correct.
and it was gesturing.
Okay. Sure.
Do you give a speech and the focus? Someone else's, whoever is evaluating you, is evaluating your gestures?
Yes. So, for example, the project, do you want to speak to how that project
the project
becomes evaluated?
Yes. So every meeting you're assigned an evaluator. So whoever is speaking has somebody assigned to verbally evaluate them.
Who decides on who the evaluators will be?
It depends on the club. In our club, people self-assign. We sign up for roles several weeks in advance.
Does everyone have to be an evaluator at some point? Is there some responsibility?
It's recommended. Usually brand new members don't do it because it's challenging. You have to listen to what somebody's talking about, figure out how to provide valuable feedback to that person, and stand up and give a mini speech that's organized. So it's a very
the
thorough
evaluator stands up and gives
the evaluator
absolutely.
stands up and gives a 2 to 3 minute speech about how the person delivered their
after
speech.
After the speech.
So the evaluation is given orally
orally that
Correct.
day.
Ooh.
So it's it's a challenge, but it's great opportunity to learn for business or anywhere else in life.
But it's not as hard as you might think. So, for example, if the criteria is to use gestures in your speech, there's guidelines for the speaker and there's guidelines for the evaluator. So when the evaluator is finished, when the speaker's finished, the evaluator would then evaluate the speaker based on their use of gestures. So, for example, when they're referring to big and to small or over to the side, all of the gestures and how they used it in the speech.
Now, the person giving the speech knows in advance that that speech is going to be evaluated on the basis of gestures.
Correct.
So they incorporate them somehow into the speech.
There's several pages of instructions that help guide the speaker, and then there's a sheet to evaluate. So
those are some of the things typical on the communications track.
Right.
Correct.
What would be in the leadership track?
Well, in the leadership track, there are different projects. For example, how to plan. So when you're planning the meeting as a Toastmaster, to make sure that every role is filled, you have to know how to plan. If you are learning how to give evaluations, if you're learning how to manage time, being the timer, being the Toastmaster, all of those roles, you have to be aware of how long everything is taking. Because at some point, the meeting ends. You only have an hour. Somehow you have to get all of these people to speak in that period of time. And there's instructions and ways that people can evaluate. So I would say, hey, Ben, would you evaluate me on being today's Toastmaster?
Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
And
so there's, you're not only is someone being evaluated on the basis of their speech that day, but someone else is being evaluated.
Correct.
On
their evaluation.
On the quality of their leadership in the particular role they were asked to play.
And in addition to the leadership track, for example, a good club, a good healthy club, every club has 5 officers. And the leadership track could take them to being a leader within the club. Or in Linda's case, Linda went from Vice President of Education, which is one of the most critical roles in the club. Then the next year she was president. And then from there, she went on and wanted to further develop her leadership skills and became an area governor where she managed 5 clubs. And then when she finished her term as area governor, she went on to become division governor, which managed 5 or 6 clubs within her division.
So as division governor,
really
I managed 5
skills.
areas.
So there's a lot of
So I had
planning.
over 30 clubs that were.
So it takes a lot of different skills to move up each level, and Toastmasters offers that.
And are there also levels in the communications?
Yes, there are. So, for example, Linda had focused for the last 2 or 3 years on the leadership track, and I've been focusing most of my Toastmaster career on the speaking track. So I finished the first 10 projects in the communications manual, and then there's about 24 advanced manuals between public relations or communicating on video like we're doing today, storytelling.
So you specialize.
Yeah,
Right.
now you start honing in on the area.
Doing technical speeches. So if you are someone who works in a technical field, how do you deliver that information
To
in
whom
an interesting
would you deliver
manner?
that technical speech, for example? To your regular club?
You can
or
practice in your club. If you, for work, have a technical presentation you have to deliver, you can deliver it to the club to get the practice.
It'd be hard to evaluate it, though, because
well, you're not
you need
evaluating the
knowledge of-
content.
Right.
We tend not to evaluate the content, more the delivery.
So someone who has a presentation for work, and it happens all the time in many clubs, they'll come and present it. So we may not know the content, but are you gesturing? Are you using vocal variety? Are you using movement with purpose? Are you enunciating? Are you using filler words like ahs and ums and those kinds of things? How comfortable do you look? How well do you know the material? That's priceless information.
Now, are there, going back to the technical club, for example, are there clubs that are technical clubs? As an advanced, are there advanced clubs?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a better way.
There are advanced clubs. I'm a member of a storytelling club, and we focus on telling stories because it's very important whether you're in sales, whether you're in any, just to talk to kids, to talk to adults. People remember things if it's told in a story. We focus on that.
Another advanced club might be a debate club, where they use the same rules and functions as a general Toastmaster club, but their purpose is to develop debate skills.
Now, I've heard the term table topics. What does that mean?
Table topics is an opportunity to speak extemporaneously. You have no idea what the question is, and if I was the table topics master of the day, I would say, Marge, talk to us about what you think of today's current events and whatever it might be, and what do you think of the color purple? And you would have to stand up there for 1 to 2 minutes and talk about
favorite
it.
color. How did you know?
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. Perfect.
So how long does that type of speech? Is there
1 to 2 minutes?
Oh, 1 to 2 minutes. Okay. Now, how many impromptu or table topic speeches would you have in a given meeting?
Well, the advantage of table topics is it can be used as a cushion. So if you have several long speeches, you may not have as many table topics. Or if you have some short speeches or somebody doesn't show up that day, you do more table topics.
Right. Now,
and it varies from...
Is each person who's asked to speak extemporaneously have the same topic? Because that would give an advantage to the second one that the first one.
No.
Oh, okay.
Usually
somebody
not.
thought about that.
Right.
So, do you know, for example, if you're going to be called on to make an impromptu speech?
If you are present, you're game.
well, actually, there's part of the motivation to get people to do their prepared speeches, or to be an evaluator, or to have a functionary role. If you have a role already, the rule in our club is that you don't call them to do a table topic because they already have a speaking role. So if we have 20 people and 12 people have already assigned roles, then if you're one of those 8, there's a pretty good chance you'll get called on.
So, but if you were a new member, relatively new, and maybe you hadn't given your icebreaker speech yet, and we talked a little about this earlier, and you were very afraid about this was really a hurdle for you to give that speech, because that's why you joined, because you were afraid. Would there be a tendency to always volunteer to do something so you couldn't be called on?
But then you have another speaking role.
Yeah, so that's
okay.
Okay.
Because
so that's okay.
No matter what you're doing, you're speaking.
You're going to stand up there and say something at some point in that meeting.
And yes, people do take that right.
Yes.
Or choose to leave the room at the time.
And also say that, even though you're called on, you have the opportunity to say no. No one forces you. We know how difficult it is to get up for that very first time. We won't ignore the new member or the guest. We might, first time you came, so we might present a table topic to you, Marge. Now, I know you feel you'd have no problem doing that, but somebody else, if they got up and they stood there for a minute, they'd get encouraged, and they didn't know what to do. They'd get encouragement from the floor. Oh, talk about this, or try that, or don't worry, take a deep breath, keep going. It's not like get up and fail.
It's a comfortable atmosphere.
Yes, it's a safe environment.
Now, how often, let's start that way, how often would you typically have to give a speech, a prepared speech?
It's totally self-paced.
That's right.
We encourage people that are brand new to give their icebreaker, their first speech, as soon as possible. And we like to have people continue to give a speech regularly. But if you want to give one speech a year, okay. If you want to give a speech every week and there's a time slot for you, fabulous.
So when someone volunteers to speak, they're scheduled. Can they pick whatever topic they like, or is there a topic for the day, for example?
There may be a theme for the meeting, and the theme may not necessarily encompass the speeches, but the theme might be table topics, the theme might be anecdotes that are told throughout the day. But no, the speeches don't necessarily have to coincide with that theme of the day.
But to answer your question, you can talk about anything you want. It can be my favorite trip. It can be my pets, my kids, what I do.
So you get, as someone who's in the audience, you really get a wide variety of topics, I would think. That's pretty interesting.
Most people leave our club in the morning and say, wow, I learned 3 new things today.
Because of...
We have 3 new speeches.
3 different speeches.
And all different topics.
Right.
Now, your books give goals, the workbooks. And are you required, does somebody monitor that and say, you've been in the club for 6 months now and you're really only on goal 1?
Well, the Vice President of Education monitors the progress of members. Again, it is self-paced. There are members who will never, ever, ever complete their manuals because they don't want to. And but then there are other people, as you progress, you can get the competent...
Yes. So it's sort of self-paced, but anyway, it sounds like there are enormous benefits that most of us never even thought of to doing this. And we could go on for another half hour, but we can't. So thank you.
I was hoping to make a speech.
Yes. Thank you so much to both of you for coming tonight. This was very interesting, very enlightening, and entertaining. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching AAUW Connections.